Open mic night. Straight talk all night long, baby. Oh yeah. The topic is this the worst generation for gamers?
Welcome to the very first open mic night. So, the topic is this the worst generation for gamers? And I would have to say no, and let me explain why. The reason why is because I'm old, so I've seen a lot. I've played since Generation 1. I was about 11 years old when the crash of '83 happened, the video game crash of '83 for North America. And that was definitely the worst time for gamers. Good time for consumers because you could buy games in bargain bins for really cheap. I remember going to Toys R Us and buying games for about $5, $10 less. And back then they were selling for about $30 to $40 before the crash. So you could buy games very cheap, and that was good for consumers. But for the video game makers and companies and everything, it was a terrible time. And the reason why it happened, one of the main reasons was, well, I mean, there's a lot of reasons, a lot of factors involved, but one of the big reasons was because the games were terrible. There were tons and tons of clones of Pac-Man games on the market. There was also a lot of systems. Nowadays we have 3. Back then there was probably about 12. So I'll list a few here. There was ColecoVision, Intellivision, Atari 2600, Atari 5200, and there's quite a few others, a lot of smaller ones. Vectrex, that's pretty big. But so either way, there was quite a few people trying to make money, and this was the infancy of video gaming. So there was tons of video game consoles on the market, tons of games flooding the market, and they weren't good games. There were lots of clones. There were games that were rushed. The video game makers themselves were lazy. They were taking a lot of shortcuts. Pac-Man that came to Atari 2600 had tons of flicker problems because it wasn't tested, and actually the version they released was a beta version, and they just rushed it right on cartridge and put it out. And so you ever play Pac-Man on the 52 or on the Atari 2600, tons of flickering. The ghost would flicker in and out, Pac-Man would flicker in and out. They lost a lot of money, and Pac-Man was huge back then, but that game was terrible. And let's see what else. There was tons of Pac-Man clones, like I said, and there was also companies like Purina, you know, the people who make dog food. They put out their own game for the Atari 2600, which was silly because I don't know who they were targeting. I guess the other pets of the family. Maybe they want to play Atari 2600. Maybe the dog wants to play. Quaker Oats, Tooth Invaders, which was Johnson & Johnson. And let's see, what else? Kool-Aid Man from High C, you know, Kool-Aid. Oh yeah, that guy. There was lots of people pushing and marketing the games. So not only did we have crappy games, well, those were crappy games too, but we also had marketing games built for marketing. So all those flooding all at once. So that was definitely the worst generation. Now I hear people always say here and there that this is the worst generation, but it doesn't compare to what we had back in the day. The generation may not be the best, but it's definitely not the worst. Now, for me, the best times for the generations was either the Super Nintendo generation, PlayStation 1, and PlayStation 2. Those generations were all very strong. And of course, I grew up with the Nintendo NES, so there was lots of originality games coming out, so that was a pretty good generation also. But this generation, I can say it's maybe it's not the greatest because there's a lot of games that are remakes and things like that, but it's definitely not the worst. I mean, there's a lot of games actually in this generation that I liked also. There were tons of Wii U games, 3DS games. I guess it just depends on how you look at it. But for me, definitely the worst is right before the crash of '83. games. I remember those games. I was really bored sitting in my living room as a little kid with a joystick in my hand, playing games that all were similar. Similarity of Pac-Mans and like aliens. Even there was an alien game that was like Pac-Man. You collect dots and escape the aliens. So there was all these clones. All the games were the same, all single screens. There was some laziness in the games. So that was definitely the worst time, or the worst generation as a gamer. So anyways, that is it. That's all I wanted to say. That is it for this first open mic night.